that?
Yeah, usually he texts and says he's not going to be here.
Right, yeah.
I don't remember seeing that. But Mike texted me this morning and said that he asked if I turned it on, and I said I didn't know I was supposed to. I don't care anything out. I just soon had it cold.
Who texted you?
Mike.
Oh, Mike.
So I think Mike came in and turned it up.
Somebody
has to turn it up.
Okay.
And that's actually, if you turn it up a couple hours early, by the end of the service, it'll be one.
Dolly got her coat.
Yeah.
Yeah, there he goes up there. No, great run.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
I can use excuses, Dolly.
Well, we do put a little heat bulb in your light here. To make your space warm. That's actually the most efficient way to do it.
Your head's full.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, our apologies for the heat. It's just about an hour and 55 minutes old right now. And the heat works fine, actually. And my printer's not working as well, so there are no
I'm having
problems.
trouble. I can't connect to mine. It says printer offline, and the printer's turned on. And my wife can print on it, but my computer, for some reason, won't connect to it. So I guess I'm gonna have to delete it and reload it again and try that.
That could be it. We gotta look at it anyway. It's coming out.
Mike, we were laughing about how long that bouquet on the table has lasted.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's been a long time.
Yes. Well, we all come to appreciate Chaz and Paula, particularly Chaz turning on the heat on Saturday evenings.
I'm glad he did that.
I don't know if anyone's given an update on Chaz and Paula.
No, never heard what happened.
Okay, he, somewhere around Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He got COVID.
He has tested positive for
And
COVID.
he's over it pretty much.
He had it before, didn't he?
No, I don't think so. This is his first case. And so it must have been Tuesday or so he was diagnosed. And then yesterday morning, and I checked in on him, I guess once anyway, and by telephone. And they're going fine. And then Paula emailed yesterday morning and said she had it. He's getting over it. He's getting over it. So hence, Chaz always lets us know when he turns the heat on. I don't know, I missed the text or whatever. More importantly, we've come to rely on him, so my apologies. It's warming up a bit. It's a lot warmer than when I was here at an hour and 55 minutes ago.
It doesn't take long. Remind me, and we'll pull a get well card, and everybody can sign a get well
I'll
card.
come back there for him.
Yes. We'll pull a card and put it on.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, now I remember that we got that was like early in the week.
It was early.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to say maybe Tuesday, but maybe Monday.
Monday or
somewhere
Tuesday.
there.
Yes.
He's
So,
getting along fine. He's taking it back slow where he was. And Paula said in her email message or her text message to me that she's on some different one, but it's also an antiviral. So hopefully we wish him the best.
yes. And they've been vaccinated, so hopefully it'll be a light infection.
Yes.
So, all right. The bells have rung. Welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this nice, bright, it's not spring, but it feels like spring already. So, Spring-like, yes, spring-like day. So, and we appreciate the sunlight and the warm weather, and actually the cold, the warm, that makes the maple syrup sap run, which means maple syrup time. And Shawnee Prairie, the Clark County Parks, I think is having a maple syrup something going on one of these weeks. I'll have to look at it.
First Saturdays are waffle sausage breakfast.
Yes, first Saturday.
March 4th.
March 4th, okay.
Yeah.
That's actually something to remember. That helps the park system, and it's pretty good, and it's actually homemade maple syrup.
You can tour the sugar shack as well and watch the
yeah.
maple syrup boil.
Yep, and I think I told you the story when we made maple syrup at home. My wife we had aluminum culvert we were using for a chimney for our fire, and she got it so incredibly hot she melted the aluminum chimney. That's hot when you melt aluminum.
Yeah.
So, and then I think I told you that too. The worst part is to finish it off. when we got down to real close to being maple syrup, we took it in the house and just boiled it off on the stove. That was a huge mistake because all the sugar vapor went up and stuck on the ceiling. And we had one of those popcorn ceilings, you know, with the little things that stick out. So when I tried to use a sponge to clean it off, it just ripped the shreds out of the sponge. So fun times on the farm. So, all right, do we have any announcements?
Aside from my announcing with no programs today, if you would just maybe repeat for us back here
Okay.
a couple times when you repeat the numbers,
Okay.
we'll make sure we get them. Thank
All
you.
right, yeah, Mike usually has a program, which really appreciate, but his printer's out, but I'm having trouble with my printer, so the technology world is giving us a hard time. Next week, Roberta found an article in the paper on MAGA and Black history. So we have the Black History anthem is in our hymnal 149. So next week will be our celebration of Black History Month here at church. We'll pull up some stuff to do for a presentation, and the music will be Black History oriented. A reminder, the last Sunday in March, we're going to do the Holocaust presentation. We'll talk about that in church, and then we'll have the presentation of the films afterwards, and we'll have something to eat, either pizza, or that may be kind of complicated trying to cook pizza downstairs and bring it up. So we'll figure out but we'll have something to eat. So feel free to stay after, come in late. If you don't have to come to church, you can come after church. You can leave at any time. This is just kind of a rolling progression type thing.
When did you say this is?
The last weekend in March. That should give everybody time to, and if you have a problem with that, we have a pretty limited clientele anyway, so if you have a problem with that and can't come, we can always change it to a weekend, to a Sunday when everybody can be here, if they want to be here. Okay, any other announcements? Let's see, we're having a joint service with El Dorado. When is that?
April 9th,
yeah.
Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday. So that'll be Palm Sunday, and we'll have a carry-in for that, so we'll probably have some kind of sign-up sheet or something so we can provide a meal for our friends at El Dorado.
And we'll probably do a church cleaning maybe a week before that, as we did last year.
Yes.
We'll get the word out on that.
And church cleaning doesn't take long, basically vacuum and dust, because the church doesn't really get dirty. It's just, and I haven't seen much sign of bats. Has anybody seen? So I think we've got, the bats are still up there. Hopefully we've got the entry holes into the downstairs part has been closed off. Because I've not seen signs of bats down here. So, all right. Our welcome is "Come Whoever You Are" by Marilyn Falkowski. And we've done this before. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ways to provide outreach to others in our community, in our local community, and in our world community. The prelude will be "Just a Closer Walk with Thee." Our chalice lighting, A Spark of Hope by Melanie Davis. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. Our opening hymn is 142. That's 142, Let There Be Light. Let There Be Light. This is another Universalist hymn. The music is nice, but the words are monumental. Let there be light, let there be understanding. Let all the nations gather, let them be face to face. Open our lips, open our minds to ponder. Open the doors of concord. Concord is agreement or getting along. Opening into grace. Perish the sword, perish the angry judgment, perish the bombs and hunger, perish the fight for gain. Let there be light, open our hearts to wonder, perish the terror and hallow the world God made. Let's keep that in our hearts and souls as we go along. All right, I forgot to mention, this is, I guess, another what I would call a Richard Venus Sunday. I showed you his book that he wrote. I'm going to be pulling stuff out of there right along. He is a really amazing writer and an amazing observer of the day-to-day that has the impact that can affect the way you look at the world at large. Taking from the little microcosm, what happens to you, and expanding it into what happens to everybody. So I think he has a real talent for that. And I hope Richard and Marcia are doing well where they are today. Okay, our affirmation is 462 in the hymnal. 462 in the hymnal. I shall take my voice wherever there are those who want to hear the melody of freedom or the words that might inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. My weapons are peaceful, for it is only by peace that peace can be attained. The song of freedom must prevail. Paul Robeson. I probably should have saved that for next week's, but I didn't know that next week was going to be Black History Week. But Paul Robeson is a famous black musician, author, poet. All right. Children's story. And before I do the children's story, I found something on the internet that I think you'll appreciate. And to prepare for it, let's have a moment of silence. This is retrieved from the Unitarian Universalist Hysterical Society. This is Sunday school. If I sold my house and my car, had a big garage sale, gave all my money to the church, would that get me into heaven? I asked the children in my Sunday school class. No, the children shouted. If I cleaned the church every day, mowed the yard, kept everything neat and tidy, would that get me into heaven? Again, the answer was no. Well then, if I was kind to animals and gave candy to all the children and loved my wife, would that get me into heaven? Again, they all answered in unison, no. Well, I continued, how then can I get into heaven? A 5-year-old boy shouted out, you gotta be dead. Out of the mouths of babes. Okay, here's our children's story.
The Berenstain Bears Forget Their Manners by Stan and Jan Berenstain, a Berenstain Enterprises Incorporated book. Etiquette for bears. Please and thank you help quite a lot to make a polite bear out of one who is not. There was trouble in the big treehouse down a sunny dirt road deep in bear country. Trouble with manners. The bear family's trouble with manners was that they forgot them. At first it was just an occasional please or thank you that was forgotten. Then there was a rude push without an excuse me. Then a reach across the table instead of please pass the broccoli. Mama Bear wasn't quite sure how or why it happened, but she was sure of one thing. Whatever the reason, the Bear family had becoming a pushing, shoving, name-calling, ill-mannered mess. At the table it was even worse. They were a grabbing, mouth-stuffing, food-fighting, kicking under the table, super mess. Of course, Mama Bear tried to correct Brother and Sister Bear's behavior. She tried coaxing. She tried complaining. She tried shouting. She tried going to Papa for help, though it sometimes seemed to Mama that he was part of the problem. Papa banged on the table and shouted as only he could shout, but nothing really seemed to do any good. Mama didn't like what was happening to her family, not one bit. Something had to be done, but what? The best way to fight bad habits, she thought, was with good habits. Then she thought of a plan. She got a big piece of cardboard and a marker. At the top she wrote, the Bear Family Politeness Plan. When the plan was finished, she called a family meeting and showed it to Papa and the cubs. It certainly got the Bear family's attention. Mama's plan had a list of all the rude things she wanted to stop. Beside each one was a penalty, a job or chore that went with it. If you forget a please or a thank you, you had to sweep the front steps. If you pushed or shoved, you had to beat 2 rugs. If you got caught name-calling, you had to clean the whole cellar. But Mama, sputtered the cubs, you're not being fair. It seems to me, she said, that you're the ones who aren't being fair to yourselves or anyone else. That's what manners are all about, being fair and considerate. Manners are very important. They help us get along with each other. Why, without manners? Your Mama's absolutely right, interrupted Papa. Thank you, Papa, for your comment. But interrupting is number 3 on the rude list, and the penalty is dusting the downstairs, Mama said and handed him the feather duster. Said Brother, this looks serious. I think we'd better come up with a plan of our own, or we're going to be doing a lot of extra chores. What sort of plan? Asked Sister. Well, he said, instead of just being polite, we'll be super polite. We'll please and thank you so much that Mama will get fed up and call the whole thing off. Yes, said Sister, will be so polite she won't be able to stand it. They put their plan into action. They were super polite on the stairs. After you, sister dear. Thank you, dear brother. In the hall. Excuse me, brother dear. Why, certainly, my dear sister. Waiting for the bathroom. Terribly sorry to have kept you waiting. Think nothing of it, my dear. But it didn't work the way they expected. Mama didn't get fed up at all. And after a while, brother and sister forgot about being super polite and were just polite. At the table, pass the honey, please. Certainly. In their room, would you like me to help you pick up your toys? Thank you very much. In the yard, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump you. That's all right, no harm done. And it turned out that Mama had been right. Things did go more smoothly. Once they got into the good manners habit, they didn't even have to think about it. But it wasn't so easy for Papa. He was the one who got fed up. It's a little harder to change habits when you're older, and he had to do quite a few extra chores for forgetting his manners. I'm glad to get out of the house away from that politeness plan, he said as he drove the family along the highway on a trip to the supermarket. Manners and courtesy are just as important away from home, especially on the road, said Mama as they stopped at a stop sign to let pedestrians and other cars pass. They help us drive safely. Well, grumbled Papa as they all went into the busy supermarket, I think you can have too much of a good thing. You've got to have common sense along with manners. Why, if you let everyone go ahead of you at the checkout, you'd be there forever. And sometimes you have to interrupt. Excuse me, madam, he interrupted a shopper, but I believe you have a leaking bottle in your cart. That shopper thanked him for his help. You see, he said, driving home, there's more to life than remembering your manners. Besides, manners are all right for cubs and mama bears. Bonk. But we papa bears have other things to think about. At that moment, the car in front stopped suddenly, and Papa bumped into it. He was furious. Why, that pin-headed fiddle brain, he snarled. Name-calling, reminded Sister. The penalty for name-calling was cleaning the whole cellar, so Papa gritted his teeth and remembered his manners. And a good thing, too, because climbing out of the other car was the biggest, angriest bear he had ever seen. But when the angry bear saw how polite Papa was, he remembered his manners, too. He explained that he had stopped short because a mama duck and her ducklings had crossed in front of him. Then he and Papa looked at their bumpers and saw that no harm had been done. As I was saying, said Papa as they continued on their way, it's very important for us to remember our manners at all times. And I want to thank you, Sister, for reminding me to remember mine. You're very welcome, I'm sure, said Sister Bear politely.
Which teaches us what? It's very important to remember your manners when the other person is 3 times your size. So that's not the only point of the story, but it seemed to be the major one. All right, joys and concerns. We want to remember the Ukraine. Now they're using, I think it's called barometric. The Russians are using what they call barometric bombs. This is, I don't know who was the hideous inventor. I would put it up close to the nuclear bomb. What it does is a rocket explodes over the target, but it doesn't explode with the explosion. It explodes and spreads a flammable mist that floats down onto the ground and gets inside of buildings and inside of caves and shelters and foxholes. And then the secondary detonation goes off, and this flammable mist explodes into a ball of flame. And because the mist penetrates, because it's a gas, it penetrates into a hole, into a foxhole, into a basement, into shelters, and just incinerates everybody down there. And not only that, the shock wave from this explosion is so strong that even in places where the flames aren't impinging, it will break your eardrums and scramble your insides. It will kill people even if it doesn't burn them to death. It's like some kind of devil's weapon of terror, and the Russians have deployed that. They've deployed it before. They did it when they were in Chechnya, they did it in Syria, and they actually used it when the Russians were in Afghanistan. Beyond comment on their morality. So, the war is still heating up. Both sides are approaching others. The last information I saw was that they are using up ammunition faster than they can build it or replace it. That's how much ammunition there's. So now they're importing it from China, from North Korea, and of course all the Western countries are providing ammunition, but even they are running out of ammunition. And munition, a scary situation.
Let's not forget as well those 40,000 plus victims in Syria and in Turkey. I don't know about everyone else, but you read reports even today, at least a few days ago, there were still some people alive. Truly,
7 days later, they're still finding some people alive.
And tragedy brings out such outpouring of sympathy, empathy, but also one has to scratch their head when they hear a release by Assad, leader of Syria, who used chlorine and poisonous gases for whole villages, complaining that the West was not humanitarian enough in helping them. Truly a contradiction, if you will.
And as we mentioned last week, Assad would not allow relief supplies to go through the Syrian-occupied territory to the rebel-held territory. And not only that, I think I mentioned last week, he was still attacking the rebel-held cities that had been leveled by earthquakes. He was still dropping bombs on them.
And opposing many efforts by humanitarian relief organizations who have finally penetrated after all these days just to begin helping those individuals in those remote parts of Syria.
So the people who were trapped in Syria, in rebel-held territories, if they couldn't dig them out by hand, they didn't get dug out because they would not allow heavy machinery in. And the relief they are getting is only tents and food. It is for the survivors, not the ones who suffered. Man's inhumanity to man continues. We can't make the mistake of thinking it's worse now than it was. If you remember the Crusades, or go back through history, the loss of life has been tremendous throughout human history. I guess the sad commentary is we're not making much progress to remediate that. Okay, we don't want to forget Chaz and Paula. Chaz came up positive for COVID earlier this week, and did you say Paula is now positive as well, which is not unusual. They've both been vaccinated. I think they're both doing very well, so we wish them well and hope to see them back in church. But that reminds us that COVID is still out there. As I tell you every week, wear your masks when you're in public and wash your hands. So.
And if I may share, perhaps everyone knows that even though the government is beginning to curtail relief efforts like COVID testing kits and what have you, I believe those are still available, particularly through insurance companies as well as Medicare. I just received a new supply this past week from Walgreens. And
yes.
I understand that it's 8 tests that you can actually get every 30 days. So if your test kits are expired, you might want to pursue that and get them just in case you might need them.
And I'm not sure when the free supplies run out, because that's the end of the government support. Is no longer will there be free vaccinations or free test kits. So if the test kits are still free, which that reminds me, we'll go ahead and, I bought 3. I just went ahead and bought mine at the store to have them. But if there's free ones, we might as well get them and have them available to test. These are
reimbursement either. They went right through the system at Walgreens for me.
And these are at-home test kits. They're easy to use, and they're not definitive. I mean, there are false positives and false negatives, but if you get a positive, you want to treat it like you're positive and not be around and not expose other people. And I guess my feeling would be, if you have symptoms, whether you have a test or not, don't expose other people, whether it's just the flu or whether it's the COVID flu.
East Palestine.
East Palestine. Oh yes, the explosion, the train wreck. actually, I need to be lighting candles here. And that is, we still haven't figured out what's going on there. I think I told you last week, the government has, or maybe I told someone else, the government had just, after the explosion, remember the one that happened in Canada, where the oil tankers came unhooked and rolled into the town and rolled over and exploded and killed multiple people in Canada? The Congress passed a bunch of rules about having braking systems that are automatic if it's unhooked from the engine, that the braking system automatically goes on. The Republican-controlled Congress and under Trump rescinded all those rules, all the extra safety rules for the railroads, because they were tedious and inconvenient for the railroads and cost them money. The conservative government repealed all those rules. So now we're back to the same thing can happen again, and we've seen what happens when there is a mistake made, and it's nobody's intentional mistake. It's people trying to save money, trying to make money at the expense of other people. And then, of course, we have is what the EPA is telling us true. The EPA says the air is safe to breathe, the water is safe to drink, but nobody believes them. And that's where the question is, what is the value of science and how much faith do you put in science? And how accurate is the science? All right, anything else?
Let's remember Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter has just gone into hospice. He is 98 years old. He got cancer a couple of years ago and came through cancer with a new experimental treatment and was cured. Right now he is facing the debilitation of age. He's fallen a few times, he's broken his hip. It's just as you get old, you can't cope with the world, your body can't cope with the world. His mind is bright still, and he has chosen to live out his days, the remainder of his days at home. And if you listen to him when he had the cancer diagnosis, that was like 5 or 10 years ago, he was at peace with whatever God was going to give him. I think in remembrance of Jimmy Carter, he was castigated and people made fun of him for his wearing sweaters and turned down the thermostat and blockading the Olympics because Russia was invading Afghanistan. He was one of the few presidents that took a moral stance and stuck to his moral stance. He was a Southern Baptist, did not believe in alcohol, so they did not serve alcohol at the White House. Someone who didn't do it for public looks and didn't do it when other people made fun of him. He did it because it was his faith, what he believed in, and stayed true to his faith. He is best remembered for Habitat for Humanity. The entire 40 years he's been out of the White House, he's done more for humanity than most other presidents put together. Just built house after house after house for people who couldn't afford their own house. And if you know how Habitat works, the people who receive the house have to help other people build houses. It's not a gift. It's not something that somebody gives them a house. They actually have to pay a mortgage. They have to pay rent, and they are a mortgage to buy the house. And they also have to contribute time and effort to help the next person or the last person have a house of their own. So it is a true community building effort. Anything else? I'm sure there's many things that we could mention that I haven't mentioned, and there's things I'm sure that you have that you would like to have mentioned, but are unable to do so at this time, so we hold all those things dear as well. All right, our message, yeah, I'll do that later, is 23venus. This is out of his book, Every Place is Holy Ground When Religion is Not Enough, truly a Unitarian Universalist. Dare to love the world. I want to tell you of 2 of my recent experiences. The first happened at Kroger's while I was waiting in the checkout lane. The woman in front of me had unloaded her basket. As she was writing out her check, she shouted at the cashier in a way most of us could hear, "Why is it that when I come here, you never have what I need? The reason I shop early in the morning is because I'm very busy and this is the only time I have. I don't know why you don't have lunch meat. I mean, lunch meat should be so basic." The cashier looked puzzled, wondering what it was about lunch meat that she could fix, but then asked about the kind of lunch meat the woman was looking for. Kroger's, you know, your own, you know, turkey and ham. Why can't you have it? I'm sorry, the cashier said. I will mention it to the manager. But the woman continued to shout, this is why I will shop somewhere else. I just don't understand why you can't have lunch meat here. And he stops there, and I would have to say, I'm betting Kroger had lunch meat there, and I'm betting this lady had another problem that we've all seen before. A few months ago, during rush hour, I was waiting my turn in traffic at the corner of Mad River and Alex Bell, which is a few miles from my home, at that time when Richard lived in Dayton. As is often the case, at that time of day, the line of cars is long in all four directions, as each driver waits for his or her turn to go through the four-way stop. As I approached the intersection, I waited for the other cars to take their turn. When I thought it was my turn, I started out. But just as I did, a shiny black sedan pulled into the intersection as well. I quickly put on my brakes. As the other driver crossed in front of me, he turned his head and gave me a look. It was not a look that said, gee, isn't this a tricky corner? Isn't it amazing that we find ways to regulate traffic without a light? Rather, it was a look spoken down his nose that said, buddy, how dare you? Don't even think about coming into my path. There have been times when I have given someone a dirty look, been rude or impatient over some unintentional mistake. I suspect we have all experienced from others the disrespectful behavior that seems to be creeping more and more into our daily lives. Sales clerks who couldn't care less about service, drivers who think neighborhood streets are miniature race courses, service people who believe you are the problem when asking to return a faulty appliance. And we've all seen this, and we talked about this earlier. It seems like things are getting worse, but we all have that rosy glass memory. Things were perfect in my childhood, and now they're getting worse. That's kind of the old man syndrome, or the old person syndrome. And I have a personal experience with that. On the way to church this morning, just out of town on 121, if you know, on south of New Madison, there's an S curve that comes up the hill and then goes down the hill. It's where Kettering's Kettering's slaughterhouse is. As I was coming up the hill at 55, I drive the speed limit. In my mirror, I saw 3 white cars, all of them almost looked the same, approaching me very, very fast and then standing right on my bumper. I'm thinking, well, this is going to be interesting. So the first car pulls out and passes me at the curb at Kettering's with a car coming the other way. So I stand on my brakes so he can get in before he gets hit. And then I start up again, and the second car pulls out and passes me at this next curb with another car coming the other way. So I stand on my brakes again. Literally, I had to hit my brakes to stop an accident from happening. Things getting worse? Because I complain about this all the time of people passing me on a double yellow line when I'm doing the speed limit. But when there's another car coming, it's like a suicide mission. It's like somebody saying, I'm daring you to hit me, and I don't care what happens. It's my road, and I'm taking control of it. So, about now you're probably saying to yourselves, oh, how silly. These are the petty irritations in life. Don't get so worked up. Consider for a moment the events in Tucson, Arizona. And here we're going back in history. The shooting of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, the killing of her aide, Gabrielle Zimmerman, and then he lists all the people who were killed. If you remember, that was, 10 or 15 years ago, which must have been when this was written. He lists all these people, and then 18 others in a senseless shooting at a shopping mall. In light of events like the one in Tucson, my question is whether somewhat minor irritations I noticed earlier reflect a larger malaise. Is our insensitivity to those around us reflected in the shill discourse we regularly hear over issues of affirmative action, abortion, gay rights, privatization of Medicare, and many of the pressing social issues of the day? Do the steady minor irritations we too routinely experience contribute to a murderous sociopath? I wonder if our way of handling these issues of everyday irritations and those of minor and major social importance are somehow related. Things have not changed. The things he mentions, abortion, gay rights, privatization of Medicare and Social Security, those things are just as prevalent, just as relevant, and almost more dangerously in trouble today than they were 10 or 15 years ago. Is this the time when we have experienced how far beyond these slights we go in the direction of violence against others? Why what is currently described as a decline in civility more and more with us, and what might we do about it? This decline is certainly not a new phenomenon. In the 18th century, the signer of the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Rush, complained that the principles and morals of the people had declined. It was also a time when the etiquette books were all the rage. The Ms. Manners of those days were advising dinner guests to discontinue their practice of wiping their teeth on the tablecloth after dinner. I am not talking about table manners, but how we treat one another. Wiping their teeth on the tablecloth, that must have been so prevalent that they wrote it down in a book, which I can't even imagine. Not picking your teeth with a toothpick or your Bowie knife, but wiping your teeth on the tablecloth. All right. A code of civility did emerge among us, and some having suggested that because consideration of others was a necessary part of fostering good work habits and social interaction, concern for proper behavior created a middle class that grew at a surprising rate following the Civil War. Being polite and courteous has only a little to do with using the right fork, however, and much more with instilling a sense of concern and regard for others. I remember in one of the first books on etiquette I read as a teenager, the overriding principle of the author was a reminder that of one's host would be even more appropriate and would override any social faux pas. Of course, Freud and others have long held that a polite demeanor is actually a thin veneer hiding the raw forces of lust, greed, and fear that lie just below the surface of such superficial behavior. What we have seen in recent years is violence becoming the primary way to resolve differences. Remember, this is 15 years ago. What would Richard think now with the violence that's going on? But whether or not we have made gains over time in our behavior or are simply reverting to our primal selves, I sense there is a rising lack of respect among people, and that we are less caring of one another than is good for us. Many have pointed out that our whole social order is in transition. The values of yesterday are not holding, and the values of tomorrow are not yet universal. As one newspaper report reminds us, the average consumer holds more computer power in his or her pocket than existed in the entire world 30 years ago. In this transition time, roles are shifting, and the sense of knowing who we are and finding a comfortable niche into which to fit our lives is evaporating. There is also a growing demand for recognition and a place in the human family for those who were once marginalized. Such changes are long overdue and necessary, but they produce a heightened sense of insecurity among many who are not comfortable or feel threatened by these changes. Same-sex marriage, abortion, you can see the threats that these people are working under, and you can see the violent reaction that they are promoting. Following 9/11, it has become clear that the enemies of the United States are many and determined. There are those who agree with the filmmaker turned children's book author Spike Lee, who following the massacre in Tucson suggested that the United States has become the most violent nation on earth. In a recent New York Times collection of articles about gun control, I was amazed to read the number of writers suggesting that the Tucson killings call for all of us to carry firepower on our belts. And we know in Ohio that has not changed because now there is no limitation on concealed carry. There is also the sense that those in power are calling the everyone does it defense for the behavior that is clearly without honor, if not illegal. Those we have entrusted with power regularly abuse that trust. Many in high places have eroded our confidence in the integrity of government. There is growing uneasiness that those we have elected will honorably represent us. We live knowing that an increasing number in elected office have bought their way in and come with a flawed character. Need we even name the primary example? Every day is a new revelation of some bizarre behavior. The last one I heard was that he said he was the producer of the Spider-Man show, the Spider-Man production on Broadway. How could you possibly think that well, whatever. At the same time, the religious systems of the past, through which we have defined ourselves, from which we have derived the values by which we lived, and in which we have found the very meaning that made sense of our lives, those belief systems are today wobbling and losing power. The truths held by our religious institutions are less self-evident, and there is no longer a church or synagogue or mosque that can serve as the compelling authority it once was. The religious fundamentalist movement in this country, based on blessing the nation, is growing not only in the U.S. but around the world, while rarely standing against excesses and wrongdoing. It offers no serious explanations for the complex nature of life and the myriad of problems besetting humankind. The world that is fast transforming itself has eroded our confidence in traditional values and the traditional definitions of right and wrong. It may well be that the anger, violence, and incivility we offer one another may reflect a spiritual crisis that lies at the heart of modern life. There are reasons for the anger and incivility we experience. We look about and see that the once secure ports in life, including church, workplace, and home, no longer are the safe havens, or at least not the familiar ones they once were. Workers who once could count on yearly raises and lifetime security have found wages barely, if at all, keeping up with inflation. That has not changed in 15 years. In many cases, they find they are falling farther and farther behind. Ditto. With their children wondering what will happen to their future. Job security has been replaced by downsizing. Two-income households are necessary to keep the bills paid, and fewer workers are doing more and more. The New York Times recently reported we have not yet seen the bottom of the number of foreclosures, and many more lie ahead. That actually has changed, and now we are heading back into that again. All the while, we see a growing gap between rich and poor. Basic benefits such as health care and pensions are becoming less affordable or even possible, while superstars in finance, management, sports, and entertainment call down huge salaries and have lifestyles most of us could never even dream about. Some in Washington decry efforts to bring at least a minimum of health care to those without. No change there. I wonder whether the growing divide between the super-rich superstars of television, movie, sports, and junk bonds and the rest of us contributes to the loss of self-worth and importance. The early 20th century psychoanalyst Alfred Adler suggested that our human behavior stems largely from our sense of being somewhat less than others. He wrote, quote, "The greater the sense of inferiority that has been experienced, the more powerful is the urge for conquest, the more violent the emotional agitation," end quote. Alfred Adler, and that was in the 40s that he wrote. Even if he is even partly right, he helps explain why some react in anger over the loss of the sense of importance and the worth endemic to a society that frequently begins decision-making with the financial bottom line and not human enrichment. Another underlying reason for this decline, which is more pervasive and fundamental than the rest, is described by Gary Wills in a recent article in the New York Review of Books. Why, Wills asks, has John Wayne often been chosen as America's #1 movie star? Because, he argues, our hero is the frontiersman. To become urban or suburban is to break our human spirit. Freedom is out on the plains under an endless sky. A pent-in American ceases to be American, a theme described early on by Ralph Waldo Emerson. In a lecture entitled Young Americans, Emerson argued that Americans needed the boundless West in order to become themselves. Our intense love of the rights of the individual, as expressed by Emerson and many thereafter, is exemplified in the practice of going off by yourself to be saved. John Wayne embodied that spirit, free to roam, untrammeled, unspoiled, breathing a larger air than any crammed behind desks and on busy streets. He is the hero who combines all the mythic ideas about American individualism: contact with nature, distrust of government, dignity achieved by performance, skepticism of experts. It's all in a package. He has listed the things that are being proclaimed even today. As Wills added, just as one had to go off alone to be saved, Americans have always felt that reality will be encountered and spiritual growth will occur when we go out from society's constrictions toward a cleansing solitude, toward nature, toward Walden. I sense that as this reliance on the importance of the individual, as fiercely promoted by Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh and a host of public officials, while important, also leads to incivility. And we will add Fox News to that. Lily Tomlin once quipped, "We're all in this alone." She's wrong, but many believe it and many live like it. Many do not feel connected in any real sense to those other than immediate family and friends, and often those connections are too easily broken. To be connected is to have one's freedom limited by another, and to be responsible for one's behavior because it affects another. Maybe you or I would rather be freer than that. We'd rather celebrate our freedom rather than give in to compromise. So when I bump up against you at the grocery counter or a traffic stop, I am free to shout in your face or look down my nose because we have no connection. If I believe my country right or wrong, I am free to go to war to prove it or to carry a gun to back me up. While there may be good reasons for the anger, the fear, the shrill voices, the decline in civility, there are still far more who refuse to give in, who regularly volunteer their services on behalf of others, who contribute liberally to the general welfare, who honestly and dutifully carry out their elected positions, who seek to get the best for their employees. Every day, customers at Kroger say they appreciate the incredible bounty that is available, and my experience has been the clerks are most helpful. Many at the corner of Mad River and Alex Bell politely wait their turn and allow others to pass without the slightest hint of hostility, and often a useful wave of the hand to offer direction. While rightly honoring individual self-discovery, it is worthy to proclaim that we are connected to each other and to the earth. Truth and meaning in our lives is not found in the search for the open frontier, but here in the midst of the real world. The everyday where we mix it up together and when we listen to speak with, and to honor each other, living with the tension of being unique individuals who are part of a community of seekers on a religious journey. The writer Mary Oliver says it well when she notes, quote, "There is only one question. How do we love the world?" Unquote. That, for me, is the question for us. It asks how we are to be with each other on this planet, and specifically with those we know as well as the stranger among us. In a recent column in the New York Times, David Brooks reflects on President Obama's speech in Tucson following those shooting deaths I noted earlier. Mr. Brooks reports that the president didn't try to explain the rampage that occurred there, but noted our sense of loss. He also celebrated the lives of the victims and the possibility for renewal. The columnist goes on to note that even a great speech will not usher in a period of civility. Because we are flawed human beings, we will slip back into failure, weakness, and ignorance. Even if you are at your best, Mr. Brooks writes, your efforts will be laced up with failure. The truth is fragmentary, and it is impossible to capture all of it. The world is more complicated than any human intelligence can comprehend. Each of our efforts may also be flawed, but together, if the system is working well, they move things gradually forward. Gradually forward. If we dare to love the world, we will have to face head-on the violence and the tenderness, the arrogance and the humility, the pain and the joy, the changes and the opportunities. If we dare to love the world, as Mr. Brooks puts it, together, we will have to move things gradually forward. Writer Nancy Mayers, who is confined to a wheelchair with multiple sclerosis, notes, quote, "The charity begins at home, cannot rest there, but draws one inexorably over the threshold and off the porch, down the street, and so out and out and out into the world, which becomes the home wherein charity becomes and begins until it becomes possible, in theory at least, to love the whole of creation with the same patience, the same affection, the same amusement one first practiced in between the pouts and tantrums with parents, siblings, partners, and children. Our lives are connected, and that is why we talk about a community for all of us, because we care for each other through simple gestures of kindness, letting someone into traffic, saying thank you and I'm sorry, listening instead of interrupting, healing the wounds, listening to the hurt, celebrating the joys. In seeing ourselves as connected, we will be more than civil. We will grow in compassion and caring. Perhaps we will even make the world a little better place for all. And bless Richard Venus. Comments?
There's so much in there to comment upon. Perhaps a study session would be better for us. I'm just struck by one particular part where the Wild West, if you will, the expansiveness of the West, was it Emerson writing about that?
Yes.
With that perception of freedom, might that provide a weak rationale for those thinking that freedom to bear arms as guaranteed imperceptibly by the Second Amendment? Perhaps that's what fueled the incidents of guns and violence in the Wild West. And I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, Richard talks a lot about communication and building communities through communication. So rather than putting our faith, if you will, that we have a right to bear arms, even a sophisticated military weapons, if you will, maybe it's better that we put that seal and perception of freedom into the freedom to love others and to participate in resolving our differences. Sorry, a bit rambling there, but just a random thought.
Well, he covered an immense amount of territory, but he comes back again and again to community, which is what we're all of the same mind. The question is, and the difficulty is, how do we create community among people who want their community segregated? And I mean segregated in the worst sense of the word. They want to be in community with people who believe like they do, and they want to exclude people who do not look like they do, worship like they do, believe like they do, or practice like they do.
And there is a leader creating that under the guise of I'm a leader for all, but really I'm a leader a little more for a specific group of people that want to listen carefully to what I say in terms of race baiting or whatever.
I'm not
That's
sure.
anything but leadership. That is anything but leadership.
And they don't even pretend, I don't think, to be leaders for everybody. They stand up and proudly proclaim, I'm a leader for my group, and to heck with all the rest of you. I mean, they proclaim that. That's the speech that our last president gave, where he talked about American carnage. Do you remember that on the inauguration, the first inauguration? American carnage, how terrible things were in the United States, how we were all separated and deserved to be separated, and how awful the world was. That's not a leader bringing people together. That's a leader glorying in the separation and triumphant in the ascendancy of his followers. And I guess I bring this up all the time too. Dodge City, Tombstone, all the cities out west, what was the one common theme that bound them all together? Nobody carries a gun in town. When you come into town, you check your guns at the town thing, and the marshal is there to make sure you do it. Those people had a better community in the Wild West than we have in progressive Ohio. Now anybody can carry their gun, open carry, concealed carry, however you want to carry. And I mentioned last week, Missouri just passed a law that you can't prohibit teenagers, 13 and 14-year-olds, from carrying AR-15s down the street, in the middle of the street. I mean, are we insane? I mean, there's literally something is going on. Some kind of virus is truly infecting us that I do not understand. And maybe it is civilization's way of saying it's, you know, they have these shows on called The Purge, which I've never watched. It seems like a horrible idea. But maybe we're moving towards some kind of lemmings jumping off the cliff because the population is outstripping the supplies of the world and outstripping our ability to deal with it. So the solution is just to wipe out a large portion of the population. It sure is looking like that. So I hate to be, I'm actually a hopeful person. So, I don't know why it ends up like this when we start talking. So, all right, we're running out of time. Time for the offering, and we will hear "Close to You." Oh, thank God, "Close to You" by Burt Bacharach.
Made popular by Karen Carpenter. It was a wonderful voice, Karen
Yes,
Carpenter.
Karen Carpenter, and a tragic life. Oops, knocked that off, didn't I? Okay, our closing hymn is 209, "O Come You Longing, Thirsty Souls." Amen. You longing, thirsty souls. All right, as we're closing up here, extinguishing the chalice will be 683 in the back of your hymnal. And I have a slide up here. This, as I've told you, I'm following now a site on Facebook called Between the Ears, or Between Their Ears. It's pictures that horse riders take between the ears of the horse they are riding, or in this case, the mule. And this is kind of hard to see. If you want to come up afterwards and look a little bit closer, can anybody guess where this is?
Grand Canyon.
Grand Canyon. And you know what they're doing? I am not going to be taking that trip to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. This is the mule. This line right here is a little 6-inch height of little rocks. And this down here is a mile down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. If your mule stumbles or gets bitten by a horsefly or God knows what, there is nothing between you and the bottom but air. So that was just an amazing picture. And those mules, and the reason, anybody know the reason they use mules instead of horses?
Horses are too smart to do it.
Horses, it could be horses are too smart, or horses are flighty enough. When you see these things where the cowboys in the movies, they ride the horse off the cliff into the river or jump over things that can't be jumped, a mule is too smart to do something stupid. It doesn't matter. You tell a mule what to do, and the mule will do it if it just makes sense to the mule. But mules are famous for that. That's why they call mulish behavior. Horses, if you train them or beat them or get them in the right frame of mind, will do anything you want them to do. Mules will only do what they want to do, and you have to agree with the mule that you both want to do it before they will do it. So even if you have a tenderfoot rider, some stupid kid that doesn't know what he's doing and he's jerking and bouncing around and playing stupid, the mule is not going to kill himself no matter how stupid the person is on the back of him. So that's the reason they have mules at the Grand Canyon. All right, and I'm going to show you this. This is a February haiku. Everybody knows what a haiku is. It's a certain number of syllables in a thing, and it fits with us. Their February still has snow, ours does not. But February, life is in the air, but so is influenza. Wash your filthy hands. Signed, your mother. All right, closing hymn, or Extinguished in Chalice is 683. And me. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. That's by Theodore Parker. And our postlude will be Moon River. Okay, that ends our service at First Universalist in New Madison. I hope you find your Moon River today and in the days to come. And we once again have sweets of various kinds, cookies and coffee cake, whatever, in the back there with coffee. Our best to Chaz and Paula. Hope they're feeling well, and hopefully they're back next week so they can turn the heat up. How's Cecil?
She was fine, I guess. I drove over there and opened the door in her pink pajamas, and I said, well, is that your new Easter outfit? and she said,
Oh, that's good.
she hadn't slept well and apologized for not calling and all that kind of thing.
Well, I hope she's doing well. I forgot to mention her along with Paula.
Yeah, no, she's doing fine.
Good.
Except she just didn't sleep well last night.
All right.
Which happens to us all.
Yes, doesn't it? That was an exciting end of the service for anybody who's going to watch. Yeah, there we go. Take a ride. That's not exactly Moon River. It's more like the Thunder River.